Hey everybody, I just wanted to create a video to kind of show you how I had organized this pod racer. Originally, I had everything parented underneath the engine power container, and that was going to cause issues with trying to move the entire pod racer itself that would have had to contain multiple child rigid bodies. Um, so the solution around that and the way that I wanted to try to configure this was decided to go with parent constraints. And this basically lets, as most of you already know, an entire group of unparented objects to basically move in unison, which is what I was, trying to achieve with what I want to do with animating this. So the main engine's power container, which is going to be set up with a rigid body, is going to be driven essentially by a controller that I'm going to set up for the pod racer, which is going to pull everything else in unison. Each engine is going to have a series of DoTween animations configured that I'll be able to tie into the actual controller to simulate turning of the engines, and then also to simulate the engines moving forward and backwards, like so. Let's see. So essentially I can do independent animations and control them. See how the ropes still stay attached? And then also drive the rigid body with the controller and steer and turn this pod racer. Now the problem originally with the way that I had this set up too was that this OB rope system, it seems to set the tension as soon as you start this, as soon as you play this scene here. That was going to cause issues because I needed to position. I actually needed the tension. I need more tension on this rope system, so that when you're moving and turning this, the rope system isn't slopping around like a rubber band essentially. This is going to look better for the player when you're actually driving this thing. So to get around the fact that if I tried to create a distance between the actual engine container and the pod racer itself with the rope system, whatever I did in edit mode, it was basically setting the length at runtime, and it was losing all of that tension on the rope system. So the way around that that I decided to fix was to create, it was going to set, or it does set a position once the scene starts here, and it's going to move this pod racer down into this position, and then it's also going to set the parent constraints on this pod racer. So if we go over here, just something super easy. It was just a quick solution essentially to running this problem. So once it starts, it sets the position on the pod racer, and the parent constraint script here that I have is going to set the translation rest, and then also it's going to activate the constraints on here. So if we go back over here, if we come underneath the constraints, the issue with trying to change the actual position at rest values in edit mode is it seems to change the actual pivot of this game object permanently. So the solution to this, and then also trying to adjust the offset to where I needed it to, was to set that at once the scene plays. Because once this constraint is active, so here's other solution I was trying to figure out. So right, you can't move all these different different rigid bodies that are child objects. So solution, parent constraint system, or parent constraints set up on these different objects. Cool. We can move the rest of the objects in flow with the engines. But what happens when we want to go, now that we have a constraint in the pod racer cockpit? We can't move it. But we can change, which will also be tied into the controller. We can move it, and which I am going to with the DoTween animation system, by changing the engine and power arc container position offset. Will allow us to basically animate this and set its position and rotation however we want to. So we can have rigid body driven engines, power arc follows. Each one of those engines can be independently animated through the DoTween animation system. And basically that's kind of how I have this Podracer set up. Today I'm going to be working on the different control arms, and then tying into, I don't know, probably a hinge joint, and then restricting the degree of rotation on that, and setting up the rest of the controller. So hopefully I'll have a video of this thing actually driving for you guys pretty soon.